Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about parenting. Just a couple tips for you guys because man, parenting can be tough sometimes. Am I right? I love my kids so much and I'm sure you do too, but that doesn't mean that we don't still have long, hard days. So I wanted to give you a couple tips that I've learned as a mom of four that might help you out as well. Okay, so tip number one, whine. Just kidding. Okay, scratch that. Okay, so like I said, parenting can be hard, right? It might be one of the hardest jobs on the planet. It also is probably the most rewarding job on the planet. So knowing a couple things that might make it easier is a good thing for anyone, right? So today I'm giving you my 4 tips that are things that I have kind of figured out along the way just being a mom of 4, and they are my tips for what might help you as a parent as well, whether you have 1, 4, 10, whatever. So tip number 1 is break up the numbers. So obviously if you have 1 kid this doesn't apply, but my other tips might, so stick with me. But if you have more than 1 kid, sometimes you just need to break up the numbers. Someone else shared that with me when I was a mom of 1 or 2, and I didn't realize how much that can actually help to just kind of split them up in some way. There's a million different ways to do this too if you start to think about it, but what I literally do with my kids is if they're having a hard time together or whatever's going on, I just try to break it up. So I pick 1 kid and usually I try to switch that up who that kid is. But I just pick a kid to say, hey, come do this with me, come cook with me, come clean this up with me, come unload the car with me. I don't know. I just try to break it up so that the other ones can go do their thing and another one's with me to do something. Or if I don't have a thing for them to do with me necessarily, I still try to break it up to say like, hey, you two go do this and you go do that. So give them a directed idea or task of what they might go do, but just simply splitting up those numbers for some reason makes a really big difference. And you can get a little more strategic in that by what works for your kids or your family. You might have 2 kids that work really well together, or one that kind of butts heads with a certain kid, right? So figuring out how to split those up might also help you out, but in general, break up those numbers and it can make a really big difference. Okay, tip number 2 is give them directed tasks. So I don't know how I came across this. I honestly don't remember if I read this somewhere or if I had the idea. I don't know. But I do believe that sometimes as parents we give kids a task that is honestly kind of way too big for them. And don't get me wrong, I am all about, I have chore cards for my kids. Maybe I'll do a video on that at some point if that would be helpful. But I have chore cards. They are expected to do things around our house, and that's just the way that we run our home. So I'm all about having them do chores and things like that, but sometimes I think what we give them is just like way too much and we don't really realize that. So let me give you an example of this. When we tell our kids, go clean your room, and their room is like a tornado hit it, right? And we just tell them, go clean it. No matter what their age, that is kind of overwhelming. Just like to us, it's overwhelming to have a sink full of overflowing dirty dishes, right? I'm a grown adult, and when I see the sink overflowing with dirty dishes, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do it. It's too much, right? Kids are the exact same way. They walk into their room and it's just like a mess, right? From toys, clothes, clutter, everything. They have the exact same feeling of, oh, I don't want to do it. Or think about like Legos all over the floor. They look at that like, oh my gosh, it's too much. So give them a break. We don't want to do those types of tasks when it's overwhelming and too much like that, so they don't either. And giving them a little bit more of a directed task of how to clean that up makes it so much smoother and honestly faster. So the way I do that is when we go to my oldest kids share a room, and the way we work that out to have them clean it up is I give one kid, okay, you are on books and you are on clothes. So they know, okay, I just have to do books or clothes right now. I don't have to clean up this whole mountain of a mess. I just have to do these couple things. And then once they finish that one task, they are on to the next thing, which might be shoes or Barbies or Legos or whatever. So just give them one at a time, and they'll get the whole room done eventually, and they can still do it all on their own for the most part. Depends on ages and things like that, but they could do it all as long as you break it down a little bit. And this is a side note to this task, or to this tip, but with chores, break it down a little bit smaller as well. And make sure that chores are more directed tasks and not an overwhelming, you clean the living room today. Like, that's a lot, right? Give it to be more directed, and that makes a big difference for them as well. So just give them those more directed tasks, and it helps them be able to do it a lot more simple and a lot more efficient because they're not so overwhelmed. Okay, so tip number 3 is to give them an alternative. So, let me give you an example of that. My kids try to jump on my couch a lot, even though the house rule is we don't jump on the couch. This is a thing that has tested my parent patience quite a bit, because I've told them from day one, we don't jump on the couch, and for some reason it's just so tempting, right? But if I'm being honest, I remember when my parents had a waterbed. It's so tempting, right? We tried to jump and play on that thing all the time, even though we were told not to. It's one of those things, right? So I have to remind my kids all the time, this is not a thing we do in the house. It's not okay. But the thing that I want you to catch with this is not to change your rule, or not to just like let kids run the house because they want to, but more realize that they are trying to meet a physical need that they're unaware of at the time. So my rule's not going to change. They don't get to jump on the couch at our house, but they might need to wiggle or to get some of that energy out, or they might need to jump. That might not be a bad thing. They just need some alternative way to do what they're trying to do. So I say to them all the time, if you need to jump, please go jump on the trampoline. That's what the trampoline is for, not what my couch is for, right? So I have to remind them that they have an option to jump, and there's a place they can do that appropriately, but my couch is not the place. So give them an alternative. Other alternatives to meet those wiggly needs might be, if you need to climb, go climb the tree. If you need to run around, let's go outside and play soccer. So I don't want it to sound like I change the rule, because I think it's really important for kids to have boundaries and to have expectations in the house of this is okay or this is not okay. Whatever your house rules are can fit for you, but they should be established and be consistent. And so if kids are trying to push those, they still need to know, okay, nope, that's the boundary and we can't go past that, or we can't do that, whatever it is. But they just might need an idea of how to do that appropriately, like I said. So give them an alternative. Instead of it just being you're in trouble because you did that, give them an alternative. It's okay maybe for them to have some sort of consequence, like, hey, we've talked about this a couple times and this is not okay, so here's the consequence. But here's also an idea for you of how to meet that need that you might have, right? So give them an alternative. And lastly, I have number 4, which this might be a random one, I don't know, but it's helped me a lot. And this is one I've just kind of stumbled upon throughout my parenting journey, right? I feel like that's what parenting is like stumbling and getting back up and figuring out, okay, that didn't work, let's try this one. So that's kind of what this tip is for me, or from me for you guys. And that is, give your kids a chance to explain. So like I said, I do my best to try to have some structure or boundaries or expectations, because I think really there's so much evidence and research really to say that kids do a lot better when they have those boundaries and expectations. And I see that in my kids as well, that they do well when they know this is what's expected of us, or this is what we're supposed to do. That doesn't mean they don't mess up I mess up every day, so do they. And it's a learning process. However, they do well when they have those structures. And so giving them a structure is a good thing, but I also have learned it's really good to give them a chance to explain, what were you thinking, right? So I have a good example of this. When my third baby was like 9 months old, I was in the kitchen doing stuff. So 9 months old, he was crawling around on the floor. He was mobile, but not like walking yet, but not like as fragile as they are when they're little. They're still fragile, right? But he was moving around, right? So I was in the kitchen doing stuff, and I look into the living room, and my, let's see, my daughter would have been like 4 at the time. And I look over, and she had him holding him up by his feet, and his head was hanging upside down. And I panicked, right? My mom instinct was like, what is happening? What if she drops him on his head, you know? So I ran over there, and I'll be honest with you, I totally yelled at her out of my initial reaction of fear, really, of what are you doing to the baby? And he was fine. She didn't drop him. I got there before he was dropped or anything like that. And I was like, what are you thinking? You know, what are you doing? And she's like, Mom, I was trying to do a handstand with him. And that stopped me dead in my tracks, because I would have never looked at that situation and thought, oh, she's just practicing handstands with my 9-month-old, right? Like, I don't think most parents would think that or come to that conclusion. But that was the best lesson for me to learn, because although I told her that's not the best idea to do with our baby brother, it was the best lesson for me to learn, because she told me I was doing something that made perfect sense in my 4-year-old brain, right? And that has been such a good thing for me to remember in lots of different scenarios and situations where they make a choice that's probably not the best one. But it's been really good for me to give them a chance to explain, this is what I was thinking and this is why I did that. It still is probably a bad choice, right? And I still end up telling them, okay, that makes sense. Thanks for telling me that. We still can't do that, or that still was a bad idea. But the biggest reason that I think this is a helpful tip is that when I ask them, why did you do that, or what were you thinking, it slows me down to give them a chance to explain, or to give them a chance to express what they were thinking. And honestly, this comes in situations where I've been like really upset with them for something. I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but times that I've been really upset, if I stop and ask them, what were you thinking? And I'm kind of tough on them, and I tell them, I don't know is not an answer. You don't get to tell me I don't know, because you have a reason for why you did something, right? We all do. So I kind of push them on that and say, tell me what you were thinking. Tell me why you did that. Tell me why you said that, whatever. And my kids have the best reasoning, right? It's probably terrible reasoning in a sense of they shouldn't have made that choice, but they're kids, and so they're super, they kind of have no filter, right? So they will tell you eventually, this is why I did that. And it ends up being the best lesson, because it makes me slow down and really hear them out. And it also gives me so much more to work with in teaching them, that makes sense why you thought that, but let's think about it now. This is not a great idea, right? Or that's not cool to say that, whatever it was. So slow down and give them a chance to explain themselves, because it helps you slow down, and you might be surprised at what you learn from them. So I don't have parenting all figured out. I don't know if anyone ever has parenting all figured out, but these are my 4 tips that I hope help you. If you have any thoughts, comments, questions, let me know, and share this with another parent friend if you found it helpful.